In this video, we're going to take a look at source code synchronization in CloudBees CD. So in CD, we have the concept of DSL. So we have both Groovy and YAML, where you can define the different objects and resources that you want as code. And so this source code synchronization allows us to have a code-first approach where you can make changes inside of your SCM. So here I've got an example of a procedure, and I'm able to take this and apply it directly to the server. I can make changes in here, and whenever that change is detected, it'll make the update to the server. So right now we can see I have no procedures, but I do have this procedure defined. And so what I can do is I can take this repo, I can create a new source code synchronization. So I'll add this, just call this demo sync, put this in a project. We're going to use Git as the SCM type, and I'm going to use my existing GitHub connection. I can tell it which resource to use. In this case, I'm going to just use my Kubernetes agent, and we're going to put this in a path. I'm going to put this in temp sync. And so the reason it does this is because it has to check this out to somewhere. And so this is where we're going to put that. I'm just going to paste in my repo and tell it I want the main branch. And so you can add some additional things like relative path if it's in a subdirectory in your repo. You can also choose specifically what type of objects you want to include. So if we look at this example, we can see I could choose all projects, I could choose users, I can use some wildcards to choose particular releases in a project. And so we can include those on either the include or the exclude. But as you can see here, if this is left empty, it's just going to synchronize all objects. So we'll leave those default. We also have some additional options in regards to importing it. So do we want to clean this up after every run? Do we want to ignore it? All that kind of stuff. And we can pass in some DSL arguments. So we'll just go ahead and save this as is. And here we have this synchronization. And so we'll see this trigger that the trigger was not yet configured, so we'll need to do that. And we can see when this was last run. So before we move on to the trigger, let's just go ahead and run this and see what happens. So this is going to kick off a job where it'll go through and check out the code, and then it'll run the import on all of the different Groovy scripts. So all of this has been successful. If I now go over to procedures and refresh the page, we now have that procedure. And let's say that I want to go ahead and add, let's just say a new project. And I'll just call this demo project. And so we'll just leave all the default settings for this, but I'll commit this change. So now if I come back here and run it again, as you'd expect, all of this is completed again. And because this is idempotent, we can run the same things over and over again, right? So this Jenkins deploy, this is still here, no problem with that. But if we go to our project now, this is what it was. And if I refresh, we should see the new project. There we go, demo project. So all of that's very easy to do. Now, the one question you might have is, well, how do I actually figure out the DSL to put in here? So you've got a couple of ways to do this. Let's just go ahead and create a quick procedure here to test. And this same process will apply for pretty much everything inside of CD. I'll just put it in default project, and we'll just add a basic step. Okay, so we've got nothing very exciting, but if we go to the procedure, if we go to the three dots here, I can go to DSL export, and I can choose if I want Groovy or YAML, and we can export that. And here we can see it. Very simple. The other thing you can do is on many of the different pages, you'll see this DSL editor. So you could come in here and copy it. You'll notice that there are a lot of blank fields here. And so typically you don't want to bring those along because it just clutters all the code that you're working with, because it's just going to use these default settings anyway. And so that's why when you do the DSL export, you'll see that it's much shorter. And another way to do it, if you go to the service catalog, you'll notice up here there's this export DSL option. So you can choose, if we look at this, where the resources is going to be. So we could do Kate's agent. I could choose a particular path. And so I could just say DSL export. And so what you can do is you can choose what type of object you want to export. So you could choose a specific resource or something like this, or we can just do the whole project itself. And you can choose the project that you want to focus on. So in this case, I'm going to export everything in the default project. And here we've got sort of the same options that we get on the normal export DSL, things like suppressing the nulls, and we can suppress the defaults as well. And we could choose to include the access controls. And we could do the same thing for all of the child objects. But so if I go ahead and do this, So we can see that successfully ran. So now I've pulled all of those files that were just exported to my machine. And if I open this up, we can see the tree structure here. We've got the project. We've got the individual types of resources in here. So we've got reports, we've got procedures, plugin configurations, and each of those has its own directory. So if I go to the Jenkins deploy or the test procedure we just created, I can go to the procedure.dsl itself, and that's just the top level definition. Here we can see it's got the name, which project it's in, some basic things like that. And then we can go down into the individual steps. So you can see the metadata with the order. We can see what the command was for this echo step. And then we can go into the echo and make these changes. And so as you can see, this is a lot more verbose in terms of the number of elements here. Unlike the previous example where we just had a single file that had the entire structure in it. In this case, it's broken down into a whole bunch of different elements. And this can be very desirable when it comes to working directly in a code-first approach where you don't want to have a massive DSL script that you have to search through. You can just go into the tree and figure out what the relevant step is, and go into that and make the necessary changes directly in here. Both have their trade-offs depending on what you want to do. All right, now let's jump back and let's go look at the trigger. So if we go to Administration, Configurations, Source Code Synchronization, we've got the demo sync, and we've still got that trigger that we need to set up. So if we go to Actions, Configure Trigger, we can now add this trigger. Let's call it GitHub Updates. So I'm using GitHub, and so I can use a plugin. And this is just going to be based on which set of plugins you actually have installed. So I'm going to choose, I could choose EC-Git or GitHub. And we'll see that the EC-Git plugin uses a polling approach here, whereas the EC-GitHub uses webhooks. So depending on what your situation is, you could do one or the other. With GitHub, you'll have these webhooks, which mean that every time that you make an update, it will automatically push those changes. Whereas if we choose the EC-Git approach, it'll be polling. So it's not going to be truly real time where you make the change and then it just happens. It'll take a little bit until the next polling cycle occurs. And polling is useful in a lot of situations, such as if in this case you're using github.com, and if github.com is not able to push to your server because it's behind firewalls and whatnot, that means that you're not actually ever going to get that trigger. And so polling allows you to actually poll from GitHub in this case. And so you avoid that problem. And so either one, the configuration is pretty simple. You just define, in fact, a lot of this will already be predefined because it's connected to whatever your GitHub repo is that you already defined. And you can set the quiet time minutes if you want. I'm going to leave that as the default of 0. And with that, we now have a trigger. And so this will just periodically update. So when I go and make changes, this will get those changes when it has its next poll cycle. Or it could go through the webhook setup as well. We can go through that, go to configure trigger, we can edit this, and I can change this to be EC GitHub, got a webhook. I could set a secret, and then you'll see it has the same repositories, include branches, and here you can define which events you actually care about. So in this case, we'll just care about push events, and you'll get this notification that you're going to need to go into your SCM to update because you've got a new secret here. You can choose a service count. I've already got one created. And then you just need to use this URL in GitHub in this case, or Bitbucket or GitLab or whatever you may be using. And by taking advantage of the source code synchronization, you're able to take a code-first approach to a lot of the changes that you make in the platform. So the nice thing is you're able to do this through the UI or through DSL. Whichever one you prefer, it's really up to you. And either way works nicely. I'm going to link the documentation in the description so you can check this out if you want to learn more. And if you're not using CloudBees CD and are interested to learn more, you can check us out at cloudbees.com.